welcome back to Physioplata. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Henderson, physical therapist, and this is my co-host, Dr. Patrick.
Hi, guys.
And so today we're going to talk a little bit about recovery.
Let's talk about recovery.
All right.
Yeah, so huge topic, right? Like, oh my gosh, we can take it so many different ways, but let's try to keep it simple. Let's try to keep it short and simple. I think we should stick to the top few things that are really impactful. And then obviously there's a bunch of other small things I think that each of those categories breaks down into, right? So let's just start with the big things. I'm going to go ahead and tackle the two biggest things I think that are impactful in terms of being able to train well, train successfully, and also to keep your risk of injury on a lower rate or a lower spectrum. I think the biggest two things in my opinion are number one, sleep/rest, and number two, weight training. Just kind of like, and I'm not talking about powerlifting, I'm talking about just weightlifting. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the biggest two additional components that I think not just jiu-jitsu athletes should do, but just about any athlete, right? I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to recovery personally to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 100% sleep, not just the amount of time that you get sleep, but the quality of the sleep. So there's lots of good information out there on not just sleeping a lot, but making sure you're sleeping well. And, usually going along with better sleep, at least to me, it's kind of, we'll talk a little bit about both of these things because I think it's important. Getting better sleep usually has a host of behaviors around that tend to be generally healthier for you. So like, for example, not drinking a lot, restricting your caffeine.
Wait. You looked at me really intensely there.
I know you're German.
I know I'm German, but come on now.
I'm not.
Easy now.
You're being a little easily triggered here. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay.
So just being careful about your alcohol intake, and then also monitoring your caffeine intake over, after a certain time of the day. Some people say it's like, restrict your caffeine intake after 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Those things help you get a better night's sleep. All right. That to me, I think developing a good sleep routine is huge, and it's made a big difference for me in my recovery. And then to your other point, I think weightlifting it's just it's hard to overstate how important being stronger is at just about anything that you do. My wife doesn't do jiu-jitsu. She doesn't do any of this stuff. But she does a ton of stuff where she's got to lift these big bags around the house. She's constantly gardening. She's constantly, hauling chicken feet around, doing all this stuff. And, she realized, because she's, we're both in our 50s now, man. She's like, hey, man, it's harder to do this stuff. So she's made a commitment to getting much stronger. And now she's a lot stronger. And she's doing this stuff pretty effortlessly. And I've seen that story play out with runners. I've seen it play out with triathletes, ballet dancers, gymnasts. Yeah. And I think in jiu-jitsu it's no different. Sleep, get stronger. Those are the two of the biggest things that you can do. But you got to make sure that your strength training doesn't, you've got to be careful that your strength training doesn't take away from your jiu-jitsu training. You can't be so sore from your strength training that you can't do your jiu-jitsu. And vice versa. You can't, if you're getting your ass kicked and beat up in jiu-jitsu, but the next day you don't want to do your strength training, then, something's got to be balanced out there. So I think the balance there is real important.
Yeah, and I think something I wanted to insert on what you were saying about your wife, you could have somebody say, well, I'm using those activities to get stronger, right? So I'm lifting these garden bags or whatever. Yeah. I'm from the city. I don't know what you guys do here in the country. But I'm lifting these bags that are heavy. This is my training, right? Yeah. And you have jiu-jitsu athletes do the same thing. I'm lifting this guy, at least his leg or whatever, to take him down. I'm moving bodies, right?
Jiu-jitsu is my strength training.
Exactly.
Basketball players do that too. Right? Yeah, man. Yeah, basketball. A long time ago.
Yeah. So back in the MJ days, right? Before he started training, like, remember that?
Yeah. I remember. I was there. Yeah. No, but I remember during the late 80s in the early 90s, right? And so that's it actually during the MJ days. And
Yeah.
for me, it's the Rockets. It was, I remember talking to the strength and conditioning coaches of those teams, and it was nowadays
Talk to the
it's
guys on the teams.
Yeah.
That's badass.
Yeah, it was really
I didn't
cool.
know that about that.
Yeah, those guys were really, they had some great stories because it was a transition point between, and baseball was the same way, where it's like, we play our sport to be ready for our sport. And basketball players are the same way. They wanted to play basketball. They didn't want to be in the gym. Nowadays, it's a little different. But
It's totally different.
yeah, it's totally different. Football was the one sport where strength and
Right.
conditioning and the sport were always tied closely together. Baseball, basketball, and some of the other ones, that was really a pretty recent phenomenon. But I think jiu-jitsu and combat sports, MMA guys, they're a little bit more dialed into the gym. But the jiu-jitsu guys, the jiu-jitsu community, I think it'd be really helpful.
I think it's changing, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely, I think what the transition is that you were talking about with those sports back then, it's like that transitioning is happening now as well on a maybe smaller, scale, but I think I've seen it, like it's definitely changing. And it's just basically what we're trying to say is like this activity it doesn't substitute for your overall health, right? Like you can't just have one component be addressed by that. Like you can't just have jiu-jitsu be the go-to and be all. You have to have something like weight training to support that. Just like you were talking about the example of lifting bags that are heavy, especially if you notice that they're getting more difficult to move. Like you don't go and say, well, I need to do that more. That might be one small component, right? You might need to do it more often to be stronger at it or better at it. But really what you need to do is you need to break that movement down, which is what we're doing, right? On a daily basis, break it down to its components. What muscles are, used during this activity to accomplish that goal of lifting the bag. And then you have to do something to train for lifting the bag. It sounds silly, right? But it's like you have to help your body out by preparing your body for what the stresses are that you're gonna place it under. So you have to use weightlifting to help get certain muscles stronger to assist with the lifting of the bag. If you're doing jiu-jitsu, you have to do your strength training to have healthier joints and reduce your risk of injury by having more strength, etc. Or if you're trying to go for a takedown and you're having such a hard time doing a takedown or a sweep, is there a muscle that's weak, right? That's what we're kind of like trying to get across, is like you should have supportive things in place to strengthen your body for those tasks that you're going to ask it to do. And you can't use that task to be the training tool always.
Yeah, and I know there'll probably be people that if they read this or they listen to this and they say, well, I use jiu-jitsu to lose 80, 100 pounds and it changed my life. And
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love that. I love hearing stories like that. And I'm always like, great. I said, what's going to make it even better? Getting stronger. It's going to make your jiu-jitsu, get better. What's going to make it better? Getting 7 hours of sleep at night. That's those two things. I think you nailed it. Those would be if I had to give two things for people. We didn't prep this, right?
We're just going off the cuff right now. Yeah.
But I think I agree 100%. Getting stronger and getting a good night's sleep. That's like 1 and 1A.
Yeah.
As far as recovery goes.
Yeah. Let's add nutrition into that though. Now thinking about it, obviously you've got to have fuel in the body to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. But then I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, your nutrition doesn't have to be top notch, not on point. Of course we want it to be, right? Of course it needs to be to get your highest level of performance. But I'm saying, and personally, I think like from experience and just, studying, of course, I feel like nutrition doesn't have to be as highly, adjusted as your weight training and sleep kind of routine. I feel like your nutrition can be somewhat subpar by you sleeping enough, but doing weightlifting, and it'll help mitigate that. And then, of course, if you add good nutrition to it, that's like the best scenario.
Right. Yeah.
So I might be a little throwing out something controversial here. What do you think?
I think it's controversial, so I think you'll get people that argue with that. But at the same time, I can see you can make a case. So if you've got some priorities and you've you can only do a certain number of things,
Yeah.
right? And so I think if you're going to prioritize, I think sleep and weight training are some of the most easily accessible things. The third thing I would probably say, and this is kind of going also, this is kind of a personal thing for me, is trying to maintain a healthy body weight, for me, I've always been strong, which is great. But over the last year or so, I've let my body weight get up, and man, I tell you what, it's really had an impact on my performance. And so, fortunately, over the last few months, the blessing of the shoulder injury has been that I'm back in the gym. I'm running again. I'm taking better care of myself overall, and now that I'm getting back on the mats, man, I had the shoulder injury, right? It's pretty bad, but I'm back on the mats, and my cardio is pretty good. My strength is good. Everybody's going, "Oh, you're really strong," and it's like, okay, but it feels good. I feel a lot better, and I'm sleeping better. I'm not drinking as much alcohol. So it just feels a lot better to be. You don't have to be at a healthy body weight, but I think if you're at a body weight that's drifting up, it never hurts to bring your body weight back into a slightly more healthy
and
range.
Just to put things into perspective to you guys watching and listening, right? We're just playing devil's advocate, right? We're like simplifying things quite a bit.
For sure.
Quite a bit. But I can definitely see that. But then also, if I have to kind of like maybe addend what I was saying about the nutrition. So I'm just thinking of a average, human being. Like I'm talking about like average weight, average height, average age, and that thing, right? So as you go up in age, your room for error is narrowing by the year, right? If not faster for some people, given genetic, composition and whatnot. So yes, simplifying things in that way. That's how I would list the importance of those, tools for recovery. But of course, as you're and you have to individualize all those things again to the person, right? That's dealing with this. So yes, and then you might have to adjust it even more by saying, okay, well, this person is a little bit, thinner, less muscle mass. They need to focus on sleep and weight training a little bit more. And then you have this person who is a little bit heavier. This person has to focus a little bit more on training and nutrition. And
100%.
All the time, 100%. Right? We're just simplifying things, but it's just such an individualized topic that, I think it's good to keep it simple and then break it down.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And so, I think, what if we just take like the generic recommendation, like what could we do to recommend a good recovery sleep? And so I know people probably right now that are listening to this are probably going to go, well, what about ice baths? What about saunas? What about massage, man? There's all kinds of foam rolling. What are all these recovery things? And so I think recovery has become kind of a cottage industry.
Yeah,
right?
It's like the wellness industry, right? It's like humongous. Significant
like a lot of
amounts of money in it, and everybody wants a piece.
Yeah, and here we are telling people just to get a better night's sleep and get a little stronger.
Man, honestly, I think if we're keeping it simple, that is as simple as it gets and as effective as it gets at the same time.
Yeah.
Sleep, weight training, nutrition. If you can just tackle those major things, you are there most of the way. And then, yes, we can fine tune a little bit more. I personally like contrast bathing for recovery. The research is not great on it, but I feel like there's a very supportive, response from it on a joint and musculoskeletal recovery perspective. I would recommend it. But some other people, they don't get the same effect, right? And then that's where your modifications come in. That's where your fine-tuning comes in, where you have to play around with it a little bit. So what works for me will not work for you. And Sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it does.
I'm the same way. I love contrast baths, but I really like, over the last several
And
years.
well, maybe we should just explain what we mean by that, like contrast bathing,
Okay.
because we were talking about the ice baths, right? And then that's like usually tied in with the sauna, so that's a little different than what we're talking about. We're talking about the ice bath and then the like a hot tub back and forth kind of transition. And there's different benefits to each, right? There's just this huge explosion with ice baths and sauna, on the market over the past few years, and I'm also doing that as well. I'm a believer in it. I'm not saying it's wrong.
Same here. I do the same thing. I got a sauna. We do cold water immersion.
There
Love
you
it.
go. I'm just saying, personally for me, I prefer like having the hot tub instead of the sauna. But some other people,
Yeah.
that's not the case. And that's again what I'm saying is like if you have the big pillars of what we're talking about is important for recovery, you can always make some small adjustments here and there.
So you're saying if my sleep habits are shitty and I'm not weight training regularly, then getting in an ice bath and getting in a
It
sauna
won't
is
do
probably
enough,
not going
man.
to do shit.
I mean,
That's
it
not
helps,
recovery.
right?
That's
And
not recovery.
here's the problem.
Yeah.
I think it'll help, but the problem with that is it helps, and now you're not adjusting
you're not doing the
enough.
other stuff.
You're not doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I think like the passive treatments are given too much value.
Yeah.
You have to be diligent about figuring out the root cause of the issue that you're having. So that's what we're coming in, right? So that's what we're trying to get across to you guys, whoever is watching or listening. We're saying those things are great. If they help you recover better or faster, fantastic. Keep using it. We're not against that. But we're saying is like, if you have a chronic issue and you have to do an ice bath or a contrast bathing session each time to help that problem, like, we're your guys. Let's just, give us a call. Like, we need to figure out what's going on because you can't just extinguish the fire every time. You need to find out why is the fire starting in the first place. And that's where it matters the most for the longevity of things.
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I would say on this point, in terms of recovery, is, and this is a difficult thing to discuss because we love to train and we love to train hard. But if you're training so hard that the next day you can barely move, you can barely get out of, your training plays a big role in how much recovery you need. So if I go out and I go for a 2-mile walk, a nice little stroll, the next day I'm not going to, I could probably do the same thing because it's not very intense. If I go out and I run as hard as I can for 5 miles, the next day I might have difficulty doing the same thing. So if I've got this, this exercise routine that I'm doing, I'm walking, I'm taking an easy walk versus I'm doing a really, really hard session, my recovery for the easy session is going to be pretty passive. I don't have to do much. I'm just going to recover naturally from that. But if I train super, super hard, I'm going to have to make sure that I'm really, really mindful about making sure I'm not just adding stress on top of stress on top of stress.
Exactly.
So you've got to have, for us, a hobby up at TriStar talks about this a lot. Him and GSP and those guys, they don't train balls to the wall constantly.
I like that because I was watching something he was saying too about soreness.
Yeah.
And
you shouldn't be sore.
Ideally, if you train, you shouldn't be sore. And that's so crazy, right? What an idea that is. Like trying to get that across.
And because we got people that want to go, hey, I just want to work out so I can feel something. I want to get sore. It's like, dude.
And I've been there too, man. I'm not judging people whatsoever. I've been there many times.
I get it.
But now I'm sore all the time.
Yeah,
I don't want that either.
Yeah. You gotta make sure. And for me, and I'm a slightly different guy where I'm just like, hey, I want to know what I don't want to make myself maximally sore. I want to get the benefit out of training, so I want to push myself. But man, I'm not trying to kill myself.
Yeah.
I'm not. So if GSP's and his training methodology, and he's one of the best in the world.
Oh, don't be controversial. Don't say best.
Man, hey, dude, GSP's my guy, man. I love GSP. But if that guy, the way he trains is if he can train that way and perform that level, man, I don't see any problem with it. And my experience as well in strength and conditioning and rehab has been the same way. When we're doing a treatment, I don't want you to be sore for 5 days after we do shoulder mobs.
Yeah.
You should have a little bit more motion. You should actually feel better the next day. So
And
Same thing with strength.
that's what we should
Yeah.
say about what we were recommending with the weight training, right? And that's why I said in the beginning, not powerlifting, because that goes away from that example of working just enough to keep the muscle strong and give it enough time to remodel and have that whole adaptation phase, right? But if you're going hard in the weight training room, in the gym, running hard, I mean, you're never allowing for that adaptation phase.
Yeah.
And that's where you're breaking yourself down faster. So, you know, in general, when you're supplementing with those things, less is probably more. And then you can fine tune a little bit more here and there. Let your body always just recover from each of those specific things. Even ice baths, man. When you're going from the ice bath into the sauna, you're dehydrating yourself. So you got to be aware of that, and you have to recover from the sauna. Everything is a very balanced game, and that's why you have to be mindful of that. You can't just have one thing that fixes something, especially if it's a recurring problem.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of summarize here, we talked about the two main things are sleep, weight training. Secondarily, you can do things like, you know, ice baths and saunas and things like that, but those are pretty passive.
Yeah.
And none of those things work very well if you're not getting adequate sleep and if you're not keeping your body nice and strong. And then also being mindful of your training intensity and frequency overall, keeping those forces balanced. All right.
That's it.
I think that's good stuff for today.
Yes.
Folks, if you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more, please hit like, subscribe, share this with your friends. This is a labor of love right now for Dr. Patrick and myself, so we're trying to get this out there, try to get the message out there that you can do the sport that we all love, stay healthy, stay on the mats, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Till the next one, guys. Bye.